almost double the amount of money in the Democratic primaries this year as there was in 2020. Will you talk about that and where this money's coming from, why it's pouring in?
Yeah, this money is coming from a few different places, but with the same intent, which is wealthy donors, donors often to AIPAC, to Republicans, spreading their money around to PACs that are airdropping into districts really in the last 3 weeks with negative advertising and then with positive advertising for the candidates they want to win. So you've got Democratic Majority for Israel, you have AIPAC's new PAC, United Democracy, you have Mainstream Democrats, which is a nice one. That's the Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn PAC. Then you have some traditional, some things that have been playing in these races before. They're back, but the amount of money in these, I would add Protect Our Future, which is Sam Bankman-Fried, the cryptocurrency billionaire. That PAC has jumped into races only with, it rarely spends less than $1 million. And as we're talking, we're going to get the results from a Kentucky race in Louisville between Attica Scott and Attica Scott, who was opposed by this money, is going to lose. I think she was an underdog anyway, but it's because of this $1 million that went to Protect Our Future. The state Senate minority leader has a huge advantage over her, and you're going to see that in a bigger way later tonight in Oregon. That PAC, Sam Bankman-Fried's funded PAC, spent more than $10 million for a candidate there focused on pandemic preparedness, not like a right-wing candidate, but a candidate who's not from the Democratic Party ladder. He's not a progressive activist with a record. That has totally blown that race up. But all across the country, I mean, one thing I'm watching are these races: Summerlee in Pennsylvania, Nita Alam in North Carolina, Jamie McLeod-Skinner in Oregon. A couple of these races where money flowed in at the last minute to stop progressives from winning.
That's a Carrick Flynn guy, right? Just clarifying.
Carrick Flynn is the pandemic expert. Yes.
Right. So
he really is a pandemic expert.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting though, that field's so crowded, and that it seemed like he was able in the final, in the 11th hour, to get a large campaign contribution from this crypto billionaire. It's just like an interesting dynamic why that even happened in that race in particular.
Yeah, he's from the effective altruist community. His wife is. They knew she had worked for an organization that Sam Bankman-Fried donated to. They haven't talked. I mean, I interviewed both him and his wife about it. They didn't get deep into the details of how they got to know this community, but basically through networking. It's not as direct as Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance having employed him or having employed Blake Masters. It's not that direct, but it's similar, where you have a very wealthy person for whom he has the amount of money where you can't spend enough to spend it down and lose it, and not have enough to do it. I mean, look at Bill Gates' fortune. It's similar to that. He has an endless amount of money, and just through a couple of connections, he decided, okay, this candidate who's a politically uncorrupt non-insider who focused on pandemic preparedness, that's my guy. And he has run a campaign that has driven everyone else in this race kind of crazy. You have one guy in this race who made his fortune, ironically, in crypto, put his money into the race, and then all of a sudden this happened, $10 million worth. I mean, those polls close at 11 on the East Coast, 8 o'clock in Oregon. It's all mail. That's going to take a while to figure out. But that is a race, I think, that woke up a lot of people to how much money is sloshing around these primaries. And then over the last 2 weeks, the period I was writing about, a lot of these candidates were pointing out, like, hey, what are we going to do here? Local Democrats, are you okay with this? Can democracy as we know it survive if this succeeds? That one of their closing arguments. What are we going to do if people keep spending this money at the last minute? Do we just let them buy elections?
So wait a second. So the one in Oregon seems to be an outlier in terms of the ideological sort of deployment of this cash. But the other ones all seem to be pushing back against, specifically trying to create a firewall against progressive candidates. Is that right? And if so,
yes.
What's the agenda there? Is it just a function of we want to make sure that the Democratic Party is solid when it comes to unconditional support of Israel, or is it sort of one of those like Paul Wolfowitz moments where it's like it's one thing we can all agree on, that nobody wants a progressive in this seat because we all have our pet issues that are going to be in some way threatened by having an actual progressive in these seats?
Oh, it's a lot of the latter, and the people who are behind these efforts will tell you about it. I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried will tell you it's about effective altruism, but when I talk to folks at AIPAC and the Democratic Majority for Israel, they'll lay it out. They say, okay, in Ohio last summer, DMFI put in a bunch of money at the last minute, beat Nina Turner. We think we can multiply that and do that in other races, and they'll say so. The intent is, I'm talking about AIPAC and DMFI, is stopping progressives from winning primaries, and especially stopping anyone who has said that they would condition aid to Israel on something or other. So that's that's some of these challengers. That's also people like Rashida Tlaib, people like Cori Bush, people like Jamal Bowman, people that they couldn't beat in previous primaries. That's something that they're definitely thinking about. Is if this worked against Nina Turner and it works in these other races, can we do it in other places? I mean, even in Austin, Greg Kazar won the primary 2 months ago. It was the first clear progressive victory here. Greg, for this Austin city councilman, very aggressive, and was a triumph without a runoff. And the lesson they took from that was, DMFI especially, was, oh, well, we had a candidate in that race. We kind of got in a little bit too late. It wasn't worth investing because the lead was too big. In the future, we're going to target them a little bit earlier and wipe them out. And the messaging is rarely about Israel. It's usually this candidate, this progressive candidate, hates Democrats, is trying to disrupt the party, hates Joe Biden. Rarely is Israel the actual message, and they'll promote the candidate they are supporting. Mainstream Democrats is the same thing by almost presenting them as a progressive by saying, this candidate, you reelect them, they want a $15 minimum wage. They're fighting to lower prescription drug costs, things like that. Even in cases like the other Oregon seat, like Kurt Schrader's seat, where he was against that, where Schrader was the impediment to getting prescription drug reform and Build Back Better. They're running on, well, he's trying now, and he has a bill that could pass now. It's been, as you can understand, aggravating to a lot of the local Democrats. It's not clear beyond Democratic Party folks if all the people getting endless mail, seeing endless ads, if they reacted the same way Democratic candidates did, which is what the heck is going on.
Well, tinfoil hat time, right? Do you think that there's more money going into AIPAC because that's an easier vehicle for discrediting progressive candidates than other groups coming in and spending money, because there's the perception, like, that we could attack ex-progressive candidate in this way when, as anti-Israel, as opposed to, I don't know, another interest group coming in?
But again, it's not even how they attack them. They're not saying, don't vote for this person, they're anti-Israel. There is some of that going on behind the scenes, but that's not the main message. The message in the district is that. The message when they're talking about their strategy more broadly is, yes, we want zero progressives who are critical of Israel elected. And if you go to mainstream Democrats, that's the Reid Hoffman group, we think it is bad when members of the squad win. Third Way thinks it is bad when members of the squad and people who be allied or vote with the squad when they win. They want to stop them. They also, beyond the policy, and they're I guess they're creatures of messaging. How much do they believe this? How much are they being paid to say this? But their argument is, look, they're bad for us. These squad Democrats get elected, and there's negative stuff about them, and they hurt the whole party. So let's stop them before they can become a problem for us. That is a strategy. They're frankly really open about it.
It's fascinating in the sense that I don't know if we've ever had this type of dynamic. I mean, aside from even just like primaries, put that aside for a second, but a group that is basically pursuing an agenda, but becomes almost like a funnel for this cash. And because they're, for, like I say, this wide array of, Paul Wolfowitz, this is the one thing we can agree on. We don't want a progressive. We all have our own different reasons. But it just so happens that AIPAC stumbled upon this strategy, has the capacity to raise this money. I imagine some of that money is coming from Republicans as well, because there is the idea of supporting Israel unconditionally is sort of transpartisan, if you will. And so I'm sure there's some Republican money that goes in there. It's a twofer for them as well.